Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm a recovered alcoholic and my name is Angel. And I want to thank every member of Alcoholics Anonymous, everywhere, for the opportunity that I am sober today. And I can stand up here. I thought he was going to cry, so I'll do it for him. Because I remember the day I met Don at the Alano Club here in Palm Springs. I walked in, and I think it was a Sunday afternoon meeting, and his hair was snow white, and he had on Ray-Ban sunglasses. And I was several months sober, and I thought, this is the weirdest old fart I've ever seen. I believe that I had better sit down and listen to him, whether I understand what he's talking about or not. And I have done that for these last 13 and a half years. Whether Don and I have understood what we were talking about, we have known what we were talking about, and we have been friends. He has been my spiritual guide on the days when I was a ship without a rudder, and there have been a few days where I've been his rudder. In fact, I found a card in a drawer the other day. He got in the middle of some emotional involvement, and he bought this greeting card, one of those awful Rocky Mountain greeting cards with enough emotional layoffs to make anyone commit suicide. And I told him, I said, you cannot mail this card to anyone. I am taking this card away from you. I found it on Thursday. And I thought, I'm sorry I threw away the envelope because I was going to mail it to someone. Because I will tell you, I will get my nonsense over with right up front. I drove down here on Friday with a heavy heart because I have an area of my life that's kind of out of balance. And I never like to get too out of balance. And I drove down here, and what has saved me in this last year, what has simply saved me in this last year, is knowing that no matter what happens, I don't drink. Under any and all conditions, I don't drink. No matter what, I don't drink. Even if my ass falls off, I do not drink. And I go home and I dry my tears and I take a bath and I put on clean clothes and put gas in Robo-Truck and I go to the AA meeting. I go to the meeting and I go and share my experience, strength, and hope. And, you know, on Thursday I did not behave like a spiritual giant. Just this past Thursday I slapped a man, and I have not slapped a man in 20 years. And it made me cry, and it made him cry, and I thought, here's two sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, both sober the same amount of time, and we are both out of whack. You know, we are both out of whack, and what happened was we went our separate ways, but we have started a Thursday night meeting in Los Angeles, and we both got to the meeting. He showed up with the donuts, and I showed up with a coffee machine, and we shook hands, and I said, you call and let me know. You call and let me know what you're going to do. I have to go to Palm Springs. I have to be of love and service in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have to suit up and show up no matter what comes down in my life, no matter how I feel, no matter what my feelings are. I have to suit up and show up and be responsible in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank the committee. I want to thank Dick, who called and asked me to come share my experience, strength, and hope with you. I want to thank my friend Ray, who's here, and other people. Jane, with her 32 years of sobriety. Jane was at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she always struck me as a woman with elbow-length gloves and a string of pearls and a perfect lady from Chicago, and that she is, and that she has been all these years that I've known her. I got drunk the first time. Now, to wander off into what I'm here to do now that I've got the nonsense off and done with. I got drunk the first time when I was 13 years old, and booze did for me on that day what it did for the rest of my fun-filled drinking career, and that was to take me straight out of my mind. I drank for the effect. I drank to change how I felt about me, how I felt about you, and how I felt about some information that I had been given on that particular day when I got drunk with determination. And it was at a large Christmas party in Long Beach. I grew up in Long Beach. It was at this large Christmas party that our gay family doctor was giving. I have time to tell this tale. It's so sordid. I love it. Every now and then I meet some gay gentleman who has also been at this doctor's home, and we compare notes. Anyway, at the age of 13, I knew the doctor was gay. My mother denies it to this day, but I knew. And at the age of 13, I had a crush on the doctor's roommate. I said I had a crush. I've always had crushes on the wrong men. Anyway, I had a crush on the doctor's roommate. We went to this big Christmas party, and I marched right up to the doctor's roommate, and I asked if he slept in the guest house. And he told me that no, he shared the doctor's bedroom with the blue flocked wallpaper and the white marble wrestlers in the bathroom. Armed with that information, I got drunk. And it set up for me on that day, too, almost irreversible patterns. Drinking and men who were not interested. The doctor had little bars set up all around this big colonial mansion in Long Beach, and I had a little drink at every one of them, and I got drunk on my ass. I was absolutely flat-ass drunk. My parents escorted me this way for the party, down the brick steps between the columns. This way, my parents on either side of me. I got home, I went to bed, I slept it off in 2 hours, and I came to with this single thought. This is not too great a price to pay. This is not too great a price to pay to change how I feel about me, how I feel about you, and how I feel about reality. I will tell you that the view from the womb was that this was not going to be Twinkies and balloons. I was a little exotic neurotic from the very beginning. I was the child that was chased home from school. I was the child that was teased unmercifully. My mother dressed me funny, and they told me I was ugly. And that was how I grew up, day in and day out. I was a straight-A student and hated school. My mother had been a school teacher, so wherever I went, 24 hours a day, there was someone wagging their finger at me, someone ready to rap my knuckles with a ruler, someone ready to scold me for not performing. And the only freedom I had until I took that first drink and got drunk for the first time was living inside my head. Simply living inside my head. There was always a double message. There was what I thought in my head and what nice little thing I always said. And there was always a hideous double message going on. And it has taken me years to get the two of them aligned with one another, of what's going on in my head to match what comes out my mouth, because that was simply the only freedom I ever had. I hated high school. In high school, all I wanted to do was be pretty and popular and have a boyfriend. That was my aspiration in high school. And instead, I was the kid who graduated in the top 2% of a very large graduating class. I had all the paragraphs after my name in the back of the annual. You know, editor of the newspaper, the Honor Society, all this. And all I wanted to do was be pretty and popular and have a boyfriend. And I got a scholarship to a Christian girls' school in Columbia, Missouri. And without knowing why, I knew it would baffle me. You know, it would baffle me. And I went to Long Beach State College. Now, in this last year, I have gotten some blinding insights. Once you've sat in Alcoholics Anonymous for a few 24 hours, you get 20/20 hindsight. Thank God. You know, thank God you at least get a little perspective and so a clearer view of stuff. But when I was 14, I went to Methodist church camp, and I made one of those tearful candlelit voodoo decisions that I would be a missionary for the Methodist church and go to Africa and carry the message. Now, when I was 15, I rode the train from Los Angeles to Missouri for the summer. I met a Marine named Joe. We sat in the club car, drank bourbon, and necked for 3 days. And I got a whole other idea. God and the Methodists went out the window. And what I have finally come to believe in this year is that God does call in the markers. God does call in the markers, and I welched on a promise. I welched on a promise that I made when I was 14, and God allowed me to drink myself to the gates of insanity and death. God allowed me to drink just the perfect right amount to walk through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I could be one more time reminded in my 13th year of sobriety that my primary purpose is to stay sober and carry the message, to be a missionary in my own way, because that was what I had started out to do. So I have been given that opportunity. I have been given that opportunity. At any rate, to backtrack just a hair, this has gotten so emotional. Let me pull my little act together. When I got drunk that first time at 13, my body was loaded against me because I believed that I was born with a genetic predisposition to alcoholism. Alcoholism simply gallops through our family tree. My mother's still drinking. It really annoys me. It took me... I would be embarrassed to tell you that only last year did I realize that I was taking my drunk mother with me when I spoke at the AA meeting. Because Mom always liked to go. So when they would ask for visitors, my name's Jewel and I'm the mother of the speaker. You know, the Jewel of denial was drunk. And I was taking my drunk mother to the AA meeting with me. She's 87, she's pickled. There's really no... I, by the by, am not 67. My mother was an old broad when I was born. I grew up with parents who were a generation gap away from me anyway. My mother was 40 when I was born, and my father was 44. And it was like really that I grew up with my grandparents, and they were from the Midwest. And we fought the Civil War at the Sunday dinner table. My mother still flies a Confederate flag, and she taught me how to drink bourbon like a Southern gentleman. You know, that's how I learned how to drink. I never did learn how to drink like a lady. I was never interested in drinking like... Why would I want to sit and drink with ladies? Why would that interest me? Anyway, back to being born with alcoholism. I believe that I was born with that little fatal malady that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about, because at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, 20 sober women told me that I had an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And had someone told me when I was 12 that I was allergic to alcohol, I might have listened to them. I might have, because my mother's been allergic to penicillin all her life. If my mother has penicillin, it will kill her. My mother has never been down to the pharmacy, banging on the little window, begging for some penicillin. If I had been told that I was allergic to strawberries, I would not be over at the Ralph's Market at 6:15 in the morning banging on the produce guy for a box of strawberries. If I was told, Angel, you're allergic to strawberries. If you eat strawberries, you will break out in spots. You will fall down on Palm Canyon. You will wake up in hotel rooms with the gorilla. So if I accept that I'm allergic to strawberries, would I go buy vanilla ice cream with 0.5% strawberry extract in it? If there is anyone here trying O'Doul's, near beer, de-alcoholized wine, I encourage you sincerely to read the fine print. The big print giveth, and the fine print taketh away your sobriety. You can start near beer, near sober anonymous. Be my guest. We can have near birthday cakes with near candles on them. We'll sing happy near birthday to you. Because I'm allergic to alcohol. I am allergic to alcohol. All that crap out there on the market waiting for all of us with the big print, it is not the fault of the breweries, because there are 3 controversial items that we are not to discuss. That's sectarian religion, politics, and alcohol reform. It is not the fault of the breweries that they have near beer out there. It's all for tax purposes. I've already researched it and done my homework. But it's up to me to read the fine print. It's up to me to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's up to me to take the steps. It's up to me to stay sober. No one ever bent my elbow for the first drink. No one bent my elbow at the age of 13 and inspired me to get drunk. No one helped me around doing that. I did that all by myself. I simply did it all by myself, but I didn't know I had a fatal malady and an allergy that compelled me to drink until I was done. I have never once had a social drink. I loved how our speaker last night talked about social drinkers. I don't get it. They watch booze evaporate in the glass. I have never understood that. I have simply never understood that. I am the type, I'm what's left of a loudmouth bar drinking female, if anyone had any doubt of that. And I drank what you drank, and I went where you went, and I wore the right costume, and I had the vernacular to go with it. And if you drank Red Mountain and had a Harley, I was dead weight on the back of your hog. Wasn't that fabulous? And if you drank Scotch and milk, I acquired a taste for Scotch. The only true thing my mother ever told me was that Scotch tasted like medicine, and she was absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Scotch tastes like shit, so I acquired a taste for Cheva's Rocks. Elegant stuff. It's expensive. Out in the bars, I drank top shelf. At home, I drank garbage. At home, I drank Padre beer at $1.29 a 6-pack, and fine California unnatural jug wines. I love to drink top shelf over at the Old World on Palm Canyon. You know, well, maybe I'll do a little bit of the other half of my drunk-a-log. Anyway, I had a first husband, and he was a good man and a kind man and drank daiquiris now and then, one at a time. I, in the meantime, was a coat and suit buyer for Bullocks, and I had the power and the glory, fur-trimmed suits and navy blue dress, a string of pearls and dumb earrings, a mafia boyfriend, and I was a daily drinker. And that is how I lived my life, day after day after day after day, with New York buying trips. I always laugh that after one of my New York buying trips, it took me a year to get sober from it. Running wild in the streets. Running wild in the streets. That first husband and I got a divorce, and after I was about 5 years sober, we had an opportunity to sit down and talk over the wreckage of our past. And we simply forgave one another because really he was a good man. And the day after we got divorced, he married a housebroken woman and went on with his life. He married a lovely woman. He is a world travel designer and has grown children, and he went on with his life. And I continued on my merry way. I drank my way out of the clothing business in 8 short years. I was amazed before I was halfway through. I just drank my way out of the clothing business. And I started at the top. I started at the top going through the executive training program with Bullocks, and I just drank my way out of it. I wound up at the age of 28 managing a tacky dress store in North Laguna Beach called the Fashion Gallery, where I wouldn't have shopped drunk. And somehow I am now managing this tacky little toilet. I am hanging out with a retired Hells Angel from Louisville, Kentucky named the Bear, who has a big electric glide. And I never once connected that booze had anything to do with where I was at. I never had it depended on me knowing with self-knowledge that I was an alcoholic. You would have had a different speaker here today. I never figured it out by myself. Another sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous had to carry the message to me. At any rate, the Bear was a pharmaceutical rep at the time, and I had hoped he would turn into a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist, but it didn't look like he was going to do that, so the only great thought I had at the age of 28 was to find husband number 2, and I met him at the Orphanage Bar in Laguna. The orphanage in the early 70s was where all the hip, slick, and cool people never were as hoped to be, never were going to be. All those folks hung out at the Orphanage Bar, and I was sitting on my bar stool one night, and True Love walked up and handed me a daisy, and I thought he was hip, slick, and cool. We were from the same ethnic background, and I knew that would please my mother, and because I like exotics, you know. Some people like American cars. I like exotics. Anyway, He was Irish, and what he was he was straight off the streets in New York City, and he was a hustler, and he had street knowledge. And he was a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and I admired that in him, and we got married. The first night I met him, I raced home and I read the tarot cards. You know, that was where I was getting my major information that year, is tarot deck. He told me, he did, you know, I was sharing with my friend Ted H. this morning, you know, there have always been those Burma shave signs on my road of life, and I was always driven right past him about 90 miles an hour. I thought, oops, there's a Burma shave sign, I wonder what it said. And you know, and 5 years later I get to throw the car and reverse back up and see what I missed, because the warning signs have always been there in my life. Those signs have always been there, and I really put on my blinkers and blinders and go for it. But that second husband told me that he had quit drinking gin. It made him crazy. And what I didn't get was he was already crazy. So I married a man who drank like I drank. He was already crazy. I still thought I was wrapped fairly tightly. And we got married in front of my parents' fireplace for the second wedding. I thought that'd be nice. And I got that born-again virgin wedding dress and the long veil, because I was pure as the driven slush by that time. I got to my parents' home 3 hours early for the wedding, and that was the year my mother discovered wild turkey, and the folks and I stood at the kitchen sink for 3 hours, drank wild turkey. I was lit for another ceremony, and he showed up running on fumes, and we got married. The day after we got married, his first wife called with the wedding present. She called to report that their 8-year-old son had pulled a .22 rifle on the other little neighborhood children in San Clemente. The kid was coming to live with us. I've never babysat. I'm not housebroken. You know, and I was called upon suddenly to be Holly Housewife, Connie Casserole, and a stepmother. And I am ill-equipped for any of those things, because I have always been self-supporting through my own contributions. No man has yet to do pickup on me and save me from this vale of tears, unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be. And for the first 6 months of my second marriage, I sat home and I was a housewife drinker. When I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous and went to women's meetings and heard housewife drinkers share, I sat there and thought smugly, I'm so glad I never did that. It took me almost a year for the fumes to clear, and to realize that for the first 6 months of my second marriage, man, I had on the moo-moo, the curlers in my hair, I drank wine all day, watched soap operas, and I still don't understand housework, so I never addressed housework very well, and was a housewife drinker. And finally, because I knew all about antiques, and my husband was a liar, cheat, and a thief, so I taught him what I knew about antiques, and he taught me what he knew, and we became dishonest antique dealers in Laguna, Davuna, Laguna. We had a lovely little antique store. The plainclothes cops came through that store once a week in brown suits with black shoes. How can you miss them? The fashion police are in operation here. And I knew all about Oriental carpets and fine European porcelain and silver, pawn tickets, stolen jewelry, hot TVs, a hot car. And we had another drink. We had another drink. We drank daily. The two of us never looked at one another and said, maybe we had not a drink today. It never crossed our minds. We had the Saturday night fight every night of the week. I always had the last word because I am the intellectual, and he had the last punch, and that's how we lived our lives. That is simply how we lived our lives. It was a knockdown, drag out every night of the week, and I believe I'll have another drink. And I recently read a book review. Some woman has written a book that's about beyond the 12 steps. I haven't written to her yet, but I'll get around to it. I'm so busy. I just wrote a nice letter to Nan Robertson, who wrote Getting Better, an inside look at AA, and I told her that I was getting bitter reading her stupid book. But, you know, it's interesting, this woman who got sober in 1976 and broke her anonymity and wrote this book all about AA, took issue with square-assed, hard-nosed, fundamentalist old-timers. And I wrote and told her, I said, there's only one reason your happy ass had a place to sit in 1976 is because there were some hard-nosed, square-assed, fundamentalist old-timers who kept the meeting open for you. Give ourselves a hand. I fully understand that newcomers are the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I am here to remind myself and others that old-timers are the backbone of Alcoholics Anonymous. Old-timers are the backbone of this deal. The inmates have not yet taken over the institution. Anyway, where was I? Oh, I was back there with a stepchild and a dishonest antique dealer. Anyway, we abused all charity in the antique business. We were the only two people I know that could drive a hot car from Laguna to New York, not be able to sell it and drive it home again. We had a perfectly good Mustang, and we traded it for a 73 Monte Carlo Astro bucket seat sunroof, hot from a construction site in Oklahoma. We were even dumb enough to drive through Oklahoma with this stupid thing. We had enough paperwork on it to dazzle anyone, and we couldn't give away a hot car. We went to San Francisco, left it parked for 6 months. No one ever took it. We lost it in the desert here somewhere, because what ultimately happened to the two of us was, in the summer of 1975, we hit purgatory. We wound up in a 62 Cadillac hearse at Sam's Family Health Spa in beautiful Desert Hot Springs. The hearse was fabulous. I could still sell hearses to Eskimos, really. The whole concept of a hearse is still terrific. They have low mileage, a lot of room inside. They have never been run over 45 miles an hour. They're usually in immaculate condition. Once you get the table out and a couple of sleeping bags and a steamer trunk in and the smell of flowers out, it is great traveling. Drunk on our asses, we drove the hearse cross-country. The following summer, after the hot car, we drove the hearse cross-country, and you will be amazed the courteous treatment you get and the amount of room you get at a KOA campground when you're in a hearse. I will not destroy the anonymity of the manager of Sam's Family Health Spa at that time, or his two little delinquent sons, but I bought stolen property from his delinquent sons. The manager and my husband were having a number of interesting business deals, and what I am happy to report is that I am sober. The manager, that former manager at Sam's Family Health Spa, is sober, and so are his two grown-up kids today. That second husband of mine is wandering the streets, the wreckage. The human wreckage of what alcohol will do to another human being. What ultimately happened in that we opened a couple of antique stores. What else were we going to do? We got out at Sam's. We bought a limousine to match the hearse, and we opened a store in Desert Hot Springs and a store downstairs in the basement of Aaron Brothers Art Mart, when there used to be 10 antique stores down in the basement of what Aaron Brothers used to be right over here on the corner. Like, this is returning to the scene of the grime for me. At any rate, in the summer, and I had a house out in Painted Hills out there, the first little house on Painted Hills Road, and every now and then I'm real sorry I got rid of that little house, but I drove by not so long ago, and all that's left is the foundation, because the people who bought it turned it into a PCP lab and blew it up. My little house on the prairie is no longer there, and I'm so annoyed. Anyway, we had those two antique stores, and in the summer of 1976, he took off for Puerto Rico with a chick named Louise, and I got out the 38. Now, I sat down at the 38 to kill myself. And what I know about suicide is that I am always going to kill the wrong person. You know, I love to ask someone, have you ever considered homicide? Oh, no, not me. Have you ever thought of suicide? Oh, why, yes, all the time. Well, yeah, please, you're going to kill the wrong person. You know, I wanted to blow his head off and Louise's while I was at it. But what I did was booze saved my life on that day, and booze has saved my life a number of times over the years. Booze saved my life long enough for the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to be carried to me, is what booze did. But on that day, I was at the end of the line. I had another drink, got out, laid new track, and continued on my merry way and drank for 3 more years. I simply drank for 3 more years, knowing on that day that I was at the end of the line. In the last 3 years of my drinking, things went from worse to worser. It was awful. This alcoholism is progressive. My recovery has likewise been equally as progressive. But in that last 3 years of my drinking, I started having awful nightmares. And rather than question my drinking, modify my behavior, or do anything about it, I bought a dream diary. I will write all this stuff down. I will run a make on my dream life and see what it's all about. And the most telling nightmare that I had in that last 6 months of my drinking, I was lost in San Pedro at nightfall. I was in an old Lincoln Continental convertible. The car wouldn't accelerate over 5 miles an hour. And in the dream, I abandoned the car and I was running on foot at nightfall down this old dirty street. And in the dream, I turned and looked over my shoulder, and coming down the road behind me was about an 8-foot bottle of Tanqueray gin. Had arms. This bottle of Tanqueray, and that red seal on the Tanqueray bottle was blinking just like a stoplight, and I knew in the dream that if the Tanqueray bottle caught me, if it grabbed me, that it would kill me. And I ran on a bit further, and in front of an old saloon with those double swinging saloon doors were 2 old black men in bib overalls with white hair, and I ran up to those 2 old black men and I said, "Please, you have got to help me." The next morning when I came to, the only information I gathered from that dream was, don't drink Tanqueray gin. That stuff will kill you. However, one of the first meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that I went to at the Alano Club here in Palm Springs, I walked in on a hot spring afternoon, and sitting against the far wall were 2 old black men in bib overalls with white hair. And I walked right up to them and I said, "Geez, I'm so glad you're here." And they said, "Honey, we've been waiting for you." I have been right on time. All of my life, I have been right on time. Simply right on time. What ultimately happened on March 28, 1979 was an ordinary Wednesday, and I woke up on that day, and my thought for the day was, my life is over. I had not one more answer. My life is over. And I went over to my antique store. By that time, I'd moved over here to the courtyard of the old plaza. Walked into my antique store, and I was sitting there at my desk, and a friend came in who I hadn't seen in several months, my friend Priscilla, and she said, "What's wrong with you today?" And I said, "Geez, Priscilla, my life is over." And she said to me the words that were to change my life. She said, "I have been sober 4 months in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think there is an outside chance that booze is your problem." And I looked at this woman, and in a moment of God's grace to me, I said, "You are absolutely right. What should I do?" And in that moment of grace, unmerited, unwarranted, and undeserved, the obsession to drink was removed. I have not had that next drink since another sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous shared with me the exact nature of my problem. And Priscilla and I were functioning intellectuals on that day, and she did not give me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. She gave me a book called Games Alcoholics Play, and she said, "Go home, read this book, don't drink, there's a ladies' meeting on Friday morning." And for the first time in my life, I followed 3 consecutive directions. I simply followed 3 consecutive directions. I went home, I read that book, I didn't drink, and I went to the ladies' meeting. And I asked her if she would go to that meeting with me, and she said, "No, I can't go with you, but you go and let me know how you liked it." And that's what I did. And I wish I'd saved that dress that I wore to my first meeting. I had this old green and white polka dot dress. Got my makeup all on. Hadn't had a drink in a few days. Also, I do not remember what my last drink was. I have no more idea than a rabbit what my last drink was. I don't know whether I fell down on Palm Canyon one more time. I don't know whether I drove cross country in the hearse that day. I have no more idea than a rabbit what my last drink was. And I have heard people say that if you cannot remember your last drink, you haven't had it. And that's just nonsense. That is just nonsense. Because if you know that you have had your last drink, you've had it. I have come in here for the long haul. I did not come in to kick the tires and audit the course in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came for the long haul. So I read Games Alcoholics Play. It told me some revolutionary stuff, and I'm an intellectual, and I've been educated beyond my capacity. So it told me I could think, not drink. And that was news to me, because I had been drinking, not thinking, for years. The day before Alcoholics Anonymous, I was sitting reading The Critique of Pure Reason, underlining and making margin notes, drinking just another little glass of Krabari. The day after, I went to my first meeting. It was downstairs in the bank building over here. It was 2 blocks from the antique store. I walked to that meeting. It was the longest, loneliest, most solitary 2 blocks that I have ever walked in my entire life. I walked down the stairs, I walked through the double doors, and I walked into being home free. I walked into a place of neutrality, safe and protected, where 20 sober women welcomed me to Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought I would slide in and no one would recognize that I was new. So silly. Had on my little green and white dress. Thank God at my first meeting I kept my mouth shut. Thank heavens. And at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, 20 sober women, without an MFCC, a PhD, or anybody with more degrees than a rectal thermometer, sitting there, 20 sober women told me everything I needed to know about staying sober one day at a time for the rest of my life on an all-time basis. Don't drink. Don't drink. Even if your ass falls off, Angel, don't drink. They told me that I had an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. They told me that if I was to drink again, I would die, and that information has held me in good stead for 13 years. To drink again is to die. It says that in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. To drink again is to die. And they told me to get a copy of the 12 and 12, to get a copy of the Big Book, to get a sponsor, to take the steps to not get emotionally involved for the first 20 years or so. Fine for them. Fine for them. I would like to report that I was a rocket to stardom in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I was a quick study, and that I was an A student, and that I did the Evelyn Wood accelerated reading course in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was not, but I stayed sober. I stayed sober, and I did it my way. I am living proof that you can do it your way as long as you want to, and I ran myself to the gates of insanity and death, stone cold sober. And then I had to surrender to another sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous and take the steps and do it the way it was laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But since I know that there are a few people here who are functioning intellectuals and will likely want to do it your way, I will tell you how I did it for 2 years and 9 months, and maybe you can profit by my experience. What I did was I treated the symptom at the expense of recovering from alcoholism. I treated the symptom by not drinking at the expense of recovering from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I ran crazy in the desert. Don sat and told me every single day that we shared, he would say to me, "There is no defense for your own insanity." And I didn't get what that meant. I would go home and try and diagram the sentence. There is no defense for my own insanity. I didn't get it. So, and when I am being particularly insane on a particular topic today, that sentence still makes no sense to me. Tell me there's no defense for your own insanity. And what I did was for 2 years and 9 months, I ran around with untreated alcoholism. Untreated, full-blown alcoholism without drinking. Without drinking. I went from a daily drinker, I was a daily drinker for 12 years. And I went from a daily drinker to a daily non-drinker by the grace of God. I did not drink, but I was crazy. And what I did with the steps was, it was perfectly obvious that I was powerless over alcohol. My life was not unmanageable. I was certainly not crazy. I was an alcoholic. I had alcoholic and crazy in an either-or situation. Either you're an alcoholic or you're crazy. So I left out step 2. Step 3 suited me fine. Step 3, really, when they mentioned God at my first meeting, I went, oh, whew, thank God. Thank God. And I have heard for years, you know, be careful talking about God. You'll scare away the newcomers, and I want to know to where. I had no place else to go. Had I had someplace else to go, I would have went. But I had no place else to go. If there's anyone here who has someplace else to go, don't let me stand in your way. Please. God, thank God. You know, I was delighted. I kind of surrendered my thinking and my living to God, like I would let go of a table and hang on to the table leg. But I tried. You know, I tried. Step 4, I sat down with a Hazelden inventory guide. I wrote it out. I read it to myself. I congratulated myself on my honesty, and then I experienced Hazelden's promises. Step 6 and 7, I had some characters in my life with obvious defects. 8 and 9, I'm sorry I puked on your shoes and bothered your husband. And then I went on to chapter 6, into activity. And I was a busybody. I was a busybody around the Alano Club. Going to 3 meetings a day, getting sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, going to a step study every Friday with my 12 and 12 and a box of felt pens. 419 colors of felt pens, so that every time we went through the 12 and 12 at the step study, I can underline in a different color. I got an A in coloring book. I did everything with the steps but take the steps. Throw away them crayons. I did everything with the steps but take the steps. I memorized them, I could talk about them, I did everything but do them. I didn't work them. You know, what's this bullshit? Well, excuse me, it's Sunday morning, pardon me. What's this stuff about working the steps? You know, I have yet to be confronted with a staircase and work it. I have to take the first step so I can take the second step, so I can take the third step, so I can take the fourth step. And what I did was I just went leaping all over the staircase. I leaped all over the staircase. I was crazier than a loon. And Don and a few other people used to tell me, why don't you go scream in the desert for a while? And it always sounded like a good idea. But I didn't do it. Now, the other thing that has changed radically since I was new was that we didn't have sensitive newcomers when I was new. I was told to sit down, shut up, and listen. I was told to take the cotton out of my ears and put it in my mouth. I was told that if my lips were moving, I was lying. No one was interested in what I had to say. And Bill R. and I back there, Bill R. and I had a funny vignette that I want to repeat for posterity. Bill R. back there and I used to just stand toe to toe screaming and having a fit at one another because we were both convinced we were right. And he was up on his ledge and I wanted to get up on the ledge and push him off. And the third party sitting listening to this vignette of the two of us reminiscing over all of this was, I thought that's where the birds sat and shit. You know, because Bill R. and I'd sit there and rave and yell and scream and I'll never speak to you again and you don't know what you're talking about. And several years ago, it was his AA birthday and I gave him the donut with the candle in it and we buried the hatchet and we didn't have to bury it in each other's foreheads. You know, we buried the hatchet. I was also told when I was new that the people I disliked the most when I was new would be the people, if I stayed, who would be the ones I loved the most. And that is true. That is absolutely true. And I used to sit at meetings at the Alano Club and think, if that old dodo tells me one more time that same old tiresome story, I will launch a 4-pointed glass ashtray at his forehead and it better stick. And it finally occurred to me that the only way someone would change their story is if they drank again. That's the only way someone's story changes. That's the only way it gets a little bit more exciting and a little bit more ragged. Is if someone goes out and drinks again, commits the felony and commits the insanity and goes out and drinks again. So I'm grateful for everyone who was sitting in the rooms when I was new, and there's few left. There's few left, and when I speak other places, I reminisce about those folks who sat in the rooms, you know. Eddie Connor's always sitting there saying that the day he was dangling his feet over the edge of the Brown Palace Hotel, there was no sanctimonious son of a bitch sitting there with a yellow legal tablet and a dull Crayola saying, what step are you working, Eddie? It's God. You know, this is all about God. It's been God's grace for me. You know, it took me a long time to see in the book where it says the main object of this book is to lead me to a power greater than myself who will solve my dilemma. And Bill R. taught me that once I have sufficiently turned my will and my life over to a power greater than myself, that lack of a dilemma, that's my power. I don't have that dilemma anymore. I am powerless over beverage alcohol. Because I am powerless over beverage alcohol, my life had become unmanageable. The insanity that precedes the first drink has been removed 5 seconds at a time some days, but that insanity that precedes the first drink has been removed. I have turned my will and my life, my thinking and my living over to the care of God. I did the inventory the way it was laid out in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Who are you angry at? What are you afraid of? And what was your sex conduct? Everything, everybody, and just appalling. And fill in the details. Get a roll of toilet paper and a dull Crayola. First 3 sheets, liar, cheat, and a thief. I walked in here a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and I lied to you, and I lied to me, and I cheated you, and I cheated me, and I stole from you, and I stole from myself. And I cannot be that way anymore today. I have had a massive personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. I will never be cured of my allergy to alcohol, but I have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. The first 194 pages of the big book, which is counting from the title page to page 164, uses the word recovered 16 times. Simply uses the word recovered 16 times. Here is precisely how we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It's by taking the steps. And for myself, I have had to keep it very simple. I have simply had to keep it simple. To admission, inventory, confession, restitution, prayer, and service. That's how Bill started out. That's how Bill Wilson started out, with 6 steps of admission of who and what I am. Inventory, to look at my assets and my liabilities, to confess to God, myself, and another human being the exact nature of what's going on in my life. To make restitution a simple I'm sorry, and amends builds a bridge back to someone. An amends builds a bridge back to a person, place, or thing. A simple apology will suffice if that's what you want. And silent restitution through changes in my behavior. Prayer and service. I didn't pray only for knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. That's it. That's it. When I was new, it was popular to have a God box. And might as well post-it notes to God. Give me a break. I am to pray only for knowledge of God's will for me. And if I pray for knowledge of God's will for me, He gives me the power to carry it out. Why wouldn't He? Why wouldn't, if I sit and pray for knowledge of His will for me, would He turn around and say, well, I'm not going to give you the power to do it? If you have, some days I think I have become the Howard Beale of Alcoholics Anonymous. Remember the movie Network and Howard Beale going, I was mass hill and I'm not going to take it anymore, blah, blah, blah. If you have got the bumper sticker powerless on your car, I am here to encourage you, go rip off the last 4 letters of powerless, please, and put power-filled or powerful, F-U-L-L. God has done for me what I by myself could never do. God and Alcoholics Anonymous and all of you sitting in rooms like this everywhere have done for me what I couldn't do for myself, and for that I am grateful. And I am to be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous to suit up and show up no matter how I feel. Who cares? Who cares? I've had hurt feelings for years. Who cares? I do not come to Alcoholics Anonymous to discuss my feelings. See, I'm relentless on that topic because it doesn't tell me to come share my feelings, strength, and hope. It tells me to come share my experience, strength, and hope. My feelings come and go. My feelings just, right with the breeze. And some of my feelings I blame on the dog. The dog did that one. I have cleaned up my discussion of feelings by lecture number 4 on feelings for a Sunday morning. But I'll tell you afterwards if you're curious. Anyway, makes no difference how I feel. It absolutely makes no difference how I feel. I have to go take the action. By my thinking, so goes my action. And I have listened for years to people say that you cannot think your way into right living, but you can live your way into right thinking. And I listened to that one last time and I said, no, that's not how it works. Because nowhere in life, as I understand it, does action take place before thought. I have to think about it before I can do it. So I truly can think my way into right living. I have to think carefully before taking this step. I have to make decisions that require thought. I had to make a decision to put gas in the truck and drive down here on Friday. I had to think about it. I am not on some form of automatic pilot where I am not supposed to think. I have heard people say that, I used to think it was funny. When I was new, I thought it was a riot to hear all this stuff about, oh yes, my brain is the vulture sitting on the bedpost waiting for me to wake up in the morning. And I will tell you, that I have had a vital spiritual experience that has made me see that remark for what it is. If God saved me from drowning in a sea of alcohol, why would God then pull the ultimate dirty joke on me and say, but now you're really screwed, your brain doesn't work? Why would God do that? God gave us a brain to use. God gave me a brain to use. Don has told me from day one that Alcoholics Anonymous is a bridge from alcoholism back into life and the living. And for 3 years I hid out under the bridge. I institutionalized myself in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I eventually had to step out from under the bridge and walk across that bridge. Walk across the bridge back into life. I live in Los Angeles today. I work in a highly creative field, and all I do is suit up and show up, because the talent that I have is God's grace. I couldn't draw a straight line or paint a straight line the day before Alcoholics Anonymous, and today I am able to go work and be of service to clients, and I have some real high-powered clients that are kind of like being in the presence of, just some high-powered clients, and I have to suit up and show up and be willing to please that client and to do the very best job that I can do. And I have to be willing to, and I've learned that from Alcoholics Anonymous, because I have had to suit up and show up here, to be willing to accept the custodial relationship that I have with Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a custodial relationship. I certainly do not come to meetings to stay sober. I come to meetings to share with you how I have recovered, so that you can go out and spread the good word. As Ted said yesterday in his step workshop, the steps can be taken in a day. You can take the first 9 steps in a day. As you can take the steps as soon as you're ready to get well. If you want to sit in sickness and seclusion and be recovering from problems of daily living for the rest of your life, my blessings are with you, and I hope you have a lot of fun. But if you want to get recovered from this thing called a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, untreated alcoholism, you can take the first 9 steps in a day. I obtained my sobriety in 1 through 9, and I live in steps 10, 11, and 12, 5 seconds at a time for the rest of my life, to continue to take personal inventory, to promptly, which is not next week or next year, but promptly make amends, to seek to improve the conscious contact that I started with God back at the very beginning, and to be of love and service and to pray. That is what it is all about. That is simply what it is all about. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love it just the way it is. We're an anonymous spiritual fellowship of folks who have lost the ability to control their drinking. There are days when I get places where I think that Alcoholics Anonymous is in danger of becoming an oxymoron, like jumbo shrimp. Because we have promoted, and there are prominent speakers with videotapes, $34.95 a piece. There are people who have gone out and done what I have thought of myself. That's why I get so annoyed when I figure out they've done it, because I've thought about it. I've thought about it when I was 2.5 years sober. I decided I'd go back to school and finish up a degree in psychology and industrial psychology and go save the Ford Motor Company from alcoholism. And I did all this stuff, and I finally told Don what I was up to. And he said, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" I said, "You're nuts." He said, "You got this deal for fun and for free." He said, "You are not going to go sell what you got for fun and for free in Alcoholics Anonymous." And I said, "Excuse me, you're absolutely right. You see, I have a vocation. I work in the construction field. I have a vocation that accommodates my avocation of Alcoholics Anonymous, that allows me to go, that allows me to put on a clean bunch of clothes and put gas in the truck and go. I have a vocation. Alcoholics Anonymous is my avocation. Alcoholics Anonymous is my very life. Without Alcoholics Anonymous, I am nothing. So I will stand up for Alcoholics Anonymous. If I do not stand up for Alcoholics Anonymous, I will fall for anything, and it only takes one voice. It takes one voice in a meeting to say, "Hey, wait a minute. Hey, what's going on here? Is this a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, or is this a mental health marathon?" It only takes one voice to bring it back. Because I feel today, I know that I am in danger when I go into a meeting some days, because when I walked into bars, I knew who I was sitting down next to, by gosh and by golly. When I bellied up to the bar and claimed my bar stool, I knew I was sitting down next to a drunk. I knew that I was sitting down next to a drinker, and we were going to have a few drinks and tell a few lies and fall in love for an hour and a half. I knew who I sat down next to in bars, and I have been at meetings lately where I have had to ask the person I have sat down next to at the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, "Are you a drunk? Are you an alcoholic?" "Oh, no, I'm not." Alcoholics Anonymous, many meetings are open meetings, and certainly everyone is welcome to attend an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, but alcoholics participate in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have been at meetings where there was a group conscience to see whether only alcoholics should participate in the meeting, and there were dissenting votes. If I am not careful, if I do not stand up for Alcoholics Anonymous, we will again be in drafty church basements. We will no longer be allowed to come to lovely hotels. We will be back in church basements, and we will be seated around each other's kitchen tables, and we will return to the basics of Alcoholics Anonymous and the four absolutes of honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Is it true or false? Is it right or wrong? How will what I do affect the other person? Is it ugly or beautiful? I hope for each and every one of us that we keep coming back and pass it on. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.